One day last November, my husband took me out to dinner. And on the way into the restaurant, we stopped into a little room to the right where I had been told a friend was going to be honored that night in a surprise celebration of his life's work. When we opened the door, indeed, I saw a lot of people yell surprise at us, causing me to back out of the room, thinking we had ruined this poor guy's night. And then I looked up and saw my best friend here from Martha's Vineyard, and I knew this surprise was for me, for my 60th birthday coming up several weeks later. A milestone birthday. You know, the ones that end in the big zero. We've all had them, right? When some doors close, but others open. A little sorrow and nostalgia, perhaps, but a lot of promise. Like when you turn 30, and you probably say goodbye to a lot of firsts. Your first job out of high school or college, maybe your first promotion, your first marriage, we hope it's your only, but you're opening to an exciting new decade where you'll be mastering your profession, growing your family, probably being the hot up-and-comer in a lot of rooms. But what's behind that door if you're 60 or older? Well, as I approached that birthday, I started getting little taps on my shoulder from life that weren't all that pleasant. And I began to wonder, when I open the door this decade, will the situation reverse and be more sorrow and less promise? Like when I went from being the youngest person on a governor's senior staff, my first time in public service, to the oldest, my second time around, except for the governor himself. And I realized with a start one day, I was now the same age as the guy we used to call the senior gray hair when I was there the first time. Or when I was in the backyard playing with my bestie little 4-year-old friend Vivi. And she told me she was going to marry her daycare classmate, Henry. I got all excited and said, I cannot wait to be at your wedding. But she stopped me in my tracks when she looked up and said, no, you'll probably be in heaven. And then I read what a bunch of Harvard undergraduates had to say when they were asked what comes to mind when you think of someone 60 or older, and I want you to think about that question yourself and be honest. Guess what? Here's what they said. Wrinkled, washed up, useless. Ugh. Okay, wrinkled, I can't control that. But washed up and useless? And I started to wonder, what is the big disconnect here between how I'm feeling and how the world is beginning to see me? And is it just me, or is something more going on here? Well, it turns out something is, and it's great big. Our first speaker today referenced it. Our eulogies have gone in one generation, for a 60-year-old, have gone in one generation from she lived such a long, fulfilling life to she died so young. We're living much longer. From an average 47 years in the early 1900s to nearly 80 today. And how we're aging is changing too. You probably think of it as I had, as a peak of health in midlife, and then steady decline until whatever the day of death might be. But what's happening for many now, because of medical advances and because we're so much more active, a whole lot of people are living healthy or relatively healthy well into their 90s until the last month or week or day. It is the gift of more time. Extra years after midlife, but before decline and death. Virtually a new third of life. But what is behind this door if you're after 60, if you're 60 or older? Well, for right now, what's there is a paradigm, the way we as a community view our reality that we call retirement. Now, this is something that many of you in this room may, in one way or another, be working toward, right? Because it's the promised land. But here are several dirty little secrets about retirement. It was made up by the leisure industry 50 or 60 years ago. as a time of play and self-focus, a sort of linear life model that some people describe as learn, work, rest, die. Now, to many of you in this room, that rest thing probably looks pretty good when you're juggling family and career and gasping for air and more time. Not so much for many of the people I know who've arrived here. And they confess their private distress to me all the time, asking, now what? But feeling locked into the iron grip of this outdated paradigm. And it's outdated largely because we may be meant to play for a handful of years. That's the assumption around which retirement was developed, but not for 30 or 35. It turns out we human beings need some structure to stay motivated and some sense of relevance to something or someone beyond ourselves to stay happy. So what's really behind this door right now, because we are living longer, healthier lives, yay, but no real model for living it, is what Gloria Steinem calls an unknown country. Now, culture will resolve this mismatch someday, but what can we do now, and why should we, to make the known known? Well, the why is fairly simple, because most of us in this room, I hope most of us, will live the third someday. The why, more complex, because we all bring different experiences and perspectives to the party. We're fortunate that some big thinkers are starting to work on this right now, and they're coming up with new potential paths, encore careers, intentional communities, lifelong learning. But as a smart, successful 65-year-old friend said to me recently, I don't want one more standard to live up to. I don't want one-way path. That's what we have now. I want choices. And it dawned on me. Potential answers are great, but what we really need now is a guiding question to reach into this deep complexity and take us beyond a one-way only path. And it needs to be a question that observes an essential truth, that all of life is growth or decay, deep change or slow death, or as I heard Usher say the other day, and I really did, evolution or evaporation. Hadn't heard that one before. Because the danger in how the leisure industry sees retirement is they define it as a destination, a place to stop, not a place to grow. So what about a personal upgrade to this outdated mode of thinking? What if we retire retirement, as the leisure industry defines it, as the only choice, and replace this so-called destination with a continuing journey? And a guiding question to propel us through this life stage, each of us committing to ask, from this day until our last, what is my next? The slide didn't work, but it does say, what is my next? It's supposed to. I have a number of friends living that way already. One who's cutting back on all the time she spends on her day job to indulge a passion, the rearing of healthy dogs. Another actively serving on the board she once led. And even my mother, who is in assisted living, now going to an adult activities center and finding some sense of purpose in helping others in small ways, packing boxes for veterans, greeting others, but only after we ask this question for her. She is in the deep descent of Alzheimer's. And in the course of 2 years, the only feeling we finally heard her express was, I feel useless. She doesn't remember that she actually goes to the center, but the results of her feeling this little sense of purpose are unmistakable. Things we thought we'd never see again, we see now. A laugh, a hug, a word. Many of you in this room are not here yet, where I am or where my mother is, but it is my fond hope that one day you will be. So here's a tip to make it easier when you get here, or to perhaps help guide the people in your life who've already arrived. The people I see thriving my age and older learned at an earlier stage to intentionally put 3 things into their lives: growth, purpose, and connection. Because these are the things that keep us vibrant at every stage of life. And for those of you who are already here, where I am, you know we need these skills on steroids. When the phone no longer rings as often, when you aren't the shiny new thing, and when many of the precious titles and roles you've once held are in your past. Now more than ever, we must create our own meaning, enlarge our circle of friends, induce our own growth. Because as a wise young friend said to me recently, when I was kind of wallowing in the sadness I sometimes now feel in my gut, that the time I have left is shorter than the time I've lived. Gosh, Jan, how tragic it would be if you wasted this gift of extra time because you did not keep motivating yourself to live it. So by all means, when your time comes, take that pension or your 401k and celebrate those milestone birthdays. But please don't be surprised by the little surprises the little difficulties that may tend to overwhelm. I've been a problem solver all my life, making lemonade out of lemons and sometimes amping it up with a shot of this or that, I admit. But life will not let me solve this one. I cannot avoid dying. Here is what I can do. I can make darn sure I do not die before I'm dead by surveying the infinite number of possible paths still before me and asking and answering, anytime I feel less than fully alive, what is my next? Thank you.